Hello and welcome to this new section. We're going to be talking about the stylistic basics in Blender. I cobbled together this little animation in Eevee right here. Now if we switch to cycles you can see that the lighting and everything looks completely different. I had glass in it before, but I've decided to render it in Eevee without the glass, and I think it looks pretty good. We want to include a bit more in here than just this animation, and what I would like to explain to you is an absolute stylistic basic in Blender, namely dust particles flying around your animation to give it that realistic vibe. It's a really cool effect to put in scenes like this because it gives a bit more of a vibe, so to speak. Now we're going to do that now. We're going to go into our scene, we do Shift A, we select the cube, we go into edit mode, G, Z, 1, S, 10, and now we have our domain here, so to speak, and this is the place where we can send out our particles. We go into particle settings, we say plus, then we go for an emitter, and we can already see that a few particles are already flying around here, and they're mainly emitted outwards. Now before I do anything else, I would like to model a few dust particles first, and that means I'm just going to make some icospheres with little subdivision. We just get a few points in here in edit mode just to make sure that there's no visible icosphere there, something like that. Reduce shade smooth, and now we're going to move the appearance far enough outwards, then we duplicate the whole thing, go back to edit mode. We can also press O for proportional editing if you don't feel like doing everything individually at this moment. And yeah, in principle, this looks good enough. Maybe we'll do another long one, but I'm not in the mood for that right now. So we're going to use one of these here. We'll pack them together. We make a collection for that. And we're going to call this collection Staub, which is dust in German. And here we simply put everything in. And with that, we go into our particle system. We say render. We do render as collection. And the instance collection is supposed to be our dust or Staub. And you can see that our dust particles are sent out now. We want our particles to collide with the ground as well. So we're just going to add a collision physics type to it. And very important, our physics type should be changed from Newtonian to Boyd's, and then everything will actually work just as we imagine it. We have our particles, which don't necessarily react to gravity. They float around in space as if they were weightless. That's very nice. Now, we can also set collision for this, and then our particles will also collide with this object, which can then have a really cool effect. And then such a small particle is caught by it, it is then deflected in another direction. And now we have this incredibly large number of particles that all fly a bit weightlessly through the room, and it simply just reinforces the vibe. I think it's really, really cool. Now, with the Boyds, of course, we still have a lot of different settings options. For example, max airspeed, and if this is still going too fast for you, you can put it down to 2, for example, 10 to 2, and our particles move really slowly now. We can set the minimum airspeed here, and that means it should always move a bit, but never go completely crazy. We can also turn down the maximum air acceleration, and then the whole thing becomes a bit more static. We practically want our particles to fly weightlessly through space, just like in real life, so that the whole thing has a bit of movement, but it's not weird. And that's why we have an incredible number of great settings here in the physics type Boyds. And that's why it's just one thing that I wanted to tell you, quite simply because I think these stylistic basics, once you get into the next lectures, are very important tools to express yourself in a bit more of an artistic way, and that's why I thought it definitely deserves its own section. Now in Eevee here, however, we don't see the particles unless we've selected them, because if you take a very close look at the ground, for example, we can see that the particle, it's just very, very dark. Now, quite simply because the render engine Eevee is not that good at making these things, you can say, we can switch the whole thing over to cycles, and then we can see our particles much better. Again, they're now beautifully illuminated by our light sources. In Eevee, we can tinker around a bit to make the whole thing look good. We simply get our material, which is on all our dust particles, and simply give it a very small bit of emission strength, something red-ish. I think it's gotta be like this. And we can just take the eyedropper, we take this red color right here, and then we should have our particles, which in my opinion are still a bit too big. So we go back in here, we turn the scaling down to 0.01, maybe 0.005, really small particles. And if we then also set a little bit of depth of field in our camera, our focus object is supposed to be on the very inside, so that we have a relatively low f-stop here. And that gives us some particles that are in focus and a couple that are out of focus. And then I have the same simulation here, one without the particles, which looks like this, and one with the particles that look like this. And that's it for this lecture. We've dealt with the stylistic means of particle systems with the physics type Boyds. Now, the next lecture will be about volumetrics and the effect that volumetrics can have on your render. I'm looking forward to that one. Hope to see you then. Later, guys.